So before I start, I would just like to give an acknowledgement of country to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation upon which this land, the building is and where we conceived it. And as all the elders say, they hate it when they give a set speech, but how it actually has impacted this project. And we were fortunate right from the beginning. The client encouraged, endorsed, and enabled engagement with community, elders, and artists to help achieve this project. The project is set within Transport House. It was a building from 1938. It was a temple to car ownership. Every person who had a car had to come in here and be signed and registered. And we have 3 floors. To the left of the page is Phillip Street. That's the lowest street, and Macquarie Street on the right is a story higher. And there are 3 floors, just under 3,500 square meters and 350 staff in this building. Now, when we were first approached to participate in what was a competition, M&C Saatchi have at their brief, brutal simplicity of thought. Everything has a purpose, everything is there for a reason, and if it's not there, then let's get rid of it. Also, they have a whole series of brands, many of which were not in this building because some of the brands were already in Transport House. And there was concern about bringing everybody together. Are we going to lose identity? Is somehow something going to be lost in what everybody offers? And also, the one part of their brief that I particularly was drawn to was be provocative. I mean, who doesn't want to get that? This was actually me walking up and down Bridge Street between our studio and their office, where we would just take the presentation to them and have proper whiteboard sessions with the sketches. So there were 3 key ways in which we approached the project. One would be connection to country, not only in terms of Aboriginal land, but in connection to place. Nothing leaves the building, I will often add, alive. Everything has a value, everything can stay. And having confidence in the character, and that was a lady from M&C Saatchi, Selena, who is actually our project manager. So what does connection to country mean? It means understanding where you are. We are obviously in Sydney, right on the edge of this map here, close by in Singapore. We are straddling an escarpment. So Phillip Street on the left is really rooted in the harbour, and Macquarie Street on the west, on the east there, up to the headlands. So it's a site which is always between water and rock. And of course, when the First Fleet arrived and invaded the place, it became from a harbour to a parkland. So where the upper lands had got the breeze, became more manicured, and the harbour became the working port, the working harbour that remains. The 2 streets, which this is the front of the building to Macquarie, named after Governor Macquarie, both the streets, Macquarie and Phillip, were named after very divisive governors who caused a lot of harm to the Aboriginal community. The Macquarie Street is the civic street of Sydney. It's got the sandstone, mined only a mile away. And in this strange kind of Egyptian meets flat Florence kind of feel, whereas on the other side we had Phillip Street, another divisive governor, but rooted in the harbour. The bricks came from less than a mile away from the clays of the harbour. So you have this very workaday form, but this kind of very strong architecture, and how do we mediate between that? Now, we looked at the building, and I don't know, I'm drawn to the things that people don't like anymore, or things that are out of fashion. The whole building had been tried to be unified with a series of ceiling tiles and green carpet, of which everybody loathed it. And we were kind of challenging M&C Saatchi. And this was a phrase I used in our first presentation. In an age of mass greenwashing, how do we inspire and show leadership? And that isn't just by taking everything out and putting in the newest low carbon, low energy. It's actually looking at what you've got. Now, this is a scene in the staircase. Everybody hated these stones. These stones are all local. Everything comes from Sydney and New South Wales. And it's like saying, oh, they're ugly, like you might say a tree is ugly. And so it's also letting people look at materials again and see the beauty. Because at the end of the day, all of the people in this room are creators and shouldn't be destroyers. And when we look at celebrating heritage, we're not just talking about the things that are listed, we're talking about the things that were also made yesterday. So it's important that we keep everything. Looking beyond retain and reuse, and really keeping everything in there and seeing how it can be repurposed. Everything being hyper-local, working with local artisans, local materials, and minimizing waste. Everything is standard panels, everything is designed to be reconfigured, and taking everything. So from those desks on the left, which for whatever reason there was a vociferal hatred for, are now ceiling panels. The green carpet has been ripped up, made into new fabrics, will soon be delivered to the building with new weavings, and the rest of it made into resin tables. And the terrazzo, again, is on display. And sometimes, because we all have a budget, paint is actually what's needed. You don't need anything else because the spaces are fine. So we use color, immersive color, extensively. So confidence in character, they were scared of the building. The building had been tried to be made into the same, and it wasn't playing ball. So we looked at the individual characters of the spaces and saw how that could be made to effect. Now the floor plan is quite interesting. It's almost got these two blocks which then slide apart. So there's a natural division between them. Starting with the amplifier hall, which is the two-story hall to the bottom of the page, we actually access this through a laneway so that we have, for the first time ever in the building's history, inclusive access. And you're suddenly thrown into the middle of this grand hall. Incredible space where you would go and register your car. It had been cluttered up. We stripped everything away so that all the meeting rooms were insertions within it, and we added a staircase in the middle, which we designed with Dale Harding, an Aboriginal artist. And we wanted to make something which wasn't pretending to fit in, that was deliberately there, that was where the main space is all light and bright. This is dark, almost a void. Playing across these spaces, but celebrating what was there, and then also enjoying the new, and the fact that the new isn't the same as the old. To the front, there were spaces that they never knew what to do with because they were always awkward to get to. But they have so much public engagement and working with private clients that they could actually have these spaces, be close to resources, but still be off-site. And their cafe, which they'd always struggled with getting activity in the evening because they often have dance-offs, karaoke's, etc. So we bathed the space in midnight blue, which then allowed the park to be seen. And by using mirror and lighting, different times of the day, the bar becomes visible, or the DJ stand. And this space is now open to the community and is used throughout the weekend and the evenings. Up to the top, the first level, we had the psych. There was no heritage left in this floor at all. So talking to all of the teams, we were getting briefs from the client, but you know the client gives you a brief and then you go and sit in their space and you work in their space and you see that what they're telling you isn't how they're behaving. And we were able to look, you've been there, we actually started listening and understanding that these spaces, these big white spaces where they can write on every surface, they can pin up everywhere, they have the screens, they would spend a week doing pitches or bring clients up here. And we were reusing everything. So those screens that you saw there, they were elsewhere in the building, but you just dismantled them and reapply them. And when we're looking at windows, a lot of the windows were fine for another 10 years, so we kept them in place and we're just going to replace them in that 10-year cycle. And then we have the backstage area. It was a bit of a grubby area, but it had lovely views out on one side and nothing on the other. And they do a lot of work with post-production, with video editing where they need the darkness. So you allow that to be like that. And on the other side, these kind of workaday benches using black and white paint. That clarity of color combinations is very Saatchi, and it made them feel very at home. But then also opening out to the views. And really, it was about listening to the building and seeing what each space, what its unique characteristics were, and how you could amplify that and make it work for the function. Now, the final space, the clubhouse, was the one they were most scared of. And I think they felt fearful for the building because we kept having to go and see other sites where they could go and live and potentially be. These were the commissioners' rooms with these beautiful local timbered paneled. And in the background there, you can see the bathroom in what is now no longer existing, but incredibly powerful Sydney ceramics. They didn't know what to do here. So we made these spaces into the library spaces, so that's me. And then where the other space, we use OSB board and amber glass so they could be as free as they liked and just be, they need to feel creative. And just allow the spaces to be what they want to be. So allowing the connection to the country, nothing leaves the building, and having a confidence in your character and kind of loving the difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a brave scheme, or a brave idea, I think. Yeah. It was a little bit difficult to see. Well, in some places, it's very obvious what you've done, but in other places, it was more difficult. Talk a little bit about the furniture. Was some of that retained, or was it all renewed?
So everything that was in the building, I always say nothing leaves the building alive was the mantra. Right. There were a couple of things that did because they didn't need them anymore. And so then we'd already formed an arrangement with some of the local Aboriginal groups. So then we were able to feed their areas. And also some of the businesses were coming from off-site, so we were able to bring their furniture in.
And yeah, my first question was really, which I forgot to ask, was the building... who was it previously occupied by just before you moved in?
They had 2 floors of it. They hated it, but they loved the location. And they couldn't get over the green carpet and the way that everything felt very disconnected. So adding in that new staircase allowed the floors to be connected. And us, by having that shift of plan, it allowed us then to do differing characters and having that kind of crossing over between different areas, which then allowed each brand to retain its own identity.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I kind of liked it when we couldn't tell the difference between what was there, and that was sort of, those were the very successful bits, I guess. But just back to that psychology sort of in the workplace, you were talking about how people say that's how they want to behave and they don't actually behave like that. So now, because I'm assuming this is post-occupancy, but they moved in now. I mean, have you done any more sort of assessment into that? Are people's behaviors changing for the better, for worse?
Well, one thing that the group wanted was that the different brands collaborated. And that's been really successful because everybody now arrives in that hall, the psych hall, and goes up the stairs. So they're having to just connect there. But those psych rooms in particular, the blank page, are where everybody wants to be. And because they're all kind of hugger-bugger together there, they're able to then cross and they can see in. So it's got the different brands connecting. So Justin, the CEO, is super happy. But it was those spaces, if you're building a brand new building, I think it's those white spaces are what they've just really been drawn to because it gives them no constraints.
It's interesting, thank you.
Could you go back to an image with the staircase for a second?
Yes.
So I'm not clear about the relationship between this image and the next one, because the next one's got an escalator. Is that escalator going to the basement?
Because of the change of level. This level of the hall is on the Macquarie Street entrance, and that's at the Phillip Street. And when this was built, this was the first escalator in the Southern Hemisphere. So they used to have tours up and down it, and that's still operational.
You could ride it all day.
Yeah, I mean, when they used to give a little tot of whiskey at the top because people were overcome.
Right.
With excitement.
So the stair in relation to this, is it behind us?
We're on the landing of the stair looking down that space. So I'm on that landing up there where...
I see.
And then I'm kind of
so you'd see the escalator going down.
And you see down to Phillip
Anyway,
Street.
what my question's about the stair, because you mentioned that it was done with an Aboriginal artist.
Yeah, Dale.
So could you just help us understand how you worked that through, how you engaged and worked with the artist? Did you have to draw it in the end, or did they draw it? Or were there no drawings, or what?
So how the artist was chosen, first of all, because we discussed with the community, and because I'm not from Australia, they were very keen to engage an artist who wasn't from that. So Dale Harding's a queer artist from Queensland. So we were both coming in, and then we were both working with the community as both being outsiders, and then we were working through models and sketches and computer
So
programming.
the artist made models.
Yeah, he was with me in the model shop. We were out.
Because he understood the kind of need for the steps to be a certain going and riser and all
Yeah, well,
that.
we spent a lot of time walking around the stairs of Sydney, and because we know about how it makes you feel differently, the going and where the landing is. So we would go up and down and play with that. So the first landing is you can't see the landing. So he was very interested in looking at where you're going up and taking a leap of faith to go up to the first landing. But for that final connection, it was quite a shallow step, so you can see where you're going. And then in reverse, so we were probably going down rabbit holes, exploring the kind of psychology of stairs and not seeing.
That's
Does that
sort
answer
of
your
what
question?
I wanted to know about. Thank you.
So, congratulations on this project. With our office, we do a lot of refurbishment and reuse. So I really liked your line of nothing leaves the building. But instead of understanding what you actually did, because now you present it as is, we moved some things around, we painted some things white, and we made a new stairs. But
It's a little bit more.
yeah. So
I was amazed I kept to my 10 minutes. So we kept all the services in the building, for example, the same, because we knew we would spend a lot of money and the services were not out of date. So we changed the fittings, we changed the filters. So first of all, we keep the services. And then everything that we put in was something that could be taken out and moved around, because we knew that they're a dynamic business, they change. So on this hall, all the new meeting rooms sit below and then have a flexible connection to the services. So they can move, they can expand. We use the same modularity of all the joinery and all of the walls throughout the space. So we got the same carcass, and then they can also move around. And then in the spaces, obviously it's more than just a coat of paint, but it was looking at how they work and then looking at how we could configure the pieces to suit that. And then on some areas needed reupholstering. Sorry, I'll stop.
I think I'll just ask you a very quick, short question, hopefully, on just provocation. I think you mentioned MC Saatchi as simplicity of thought and be provocative. I think the main provocation I see from you in the design process is asking the client to do less or to do things with what they have. If I now go to the building, I'm not involved in design, I wasn't part of that process. Do you think there's something provocative that you've left in the building for them to think about now the building is complete?
I think the biggest provocation when they walk in the door, because they're walking straight into the middle of that hall, whereas before they would have seen the whole hall, they've now got that stair. So instantly it's something that's confronting that you would then walk up and around. And as you move through the spaces, before it was all kind of a neutral color, you're going into very different character areas, which engender very different ways of coming together. And that is something which they hadn't received before. And that they can't, and it's amazing how you see the noise level in the differing spaces is just driven in effect by the color, not just by the change, not the change of materials. And I found that, for myself, really interesting in our post-occupancy, because we go back and work in there ourselves and observe how they're working.